All right, welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I have another amazing guest for you this week. A good friend that I've met along my warrior journey, Brennan Murphy, the founder of Harmonic Awakenings. And I was talking to Brennan, and I'm so glad to have him on here because he's just a man of many talents and experiences, and he's just going to drop some great knowledge and wisdom. I'm sure as you listen in, particularly for you guys out there. We're going to make this episode really targeting to men in this particular episode because in this day and age, Brandon and I were talking about how do we become uh men of leaders that we're following, and how do we go on this journey. And I'm just excited to learn more about the King's Chamber, Brandon, and your experience. And we were just talking about meditation and just this journey of these different archetypes out there. And so welcome, number one, Brennan, just to the Business Roundtable Podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah. I would love just a little bit. I want to get into the King's Chamber, but I think that there's so much to you, Brennan. Kind of brief, you've had a marketing agency and now you're coaching, and you've been coaching for a while now. And you've worked with so many different business owners. I would love to hear just briefly kind of what got you to Harmonic Awakenings and why it's so important to you. And we're going to dig more into this, but a little bit of your journey, and just share that with our audience today.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So yeah, essentially, most of my life, I was born into a musical family with a father who was a touring musician, singer, songwriter, and my mother was like really into meditation and used to have weekly meditation events at the house. And so between the my father's music and my mother's meditation, I was kind of in a pretty cool situation when I was younger. And of course, when I got a little bit older, started off on my way, I had both of my parents were entrepreneurs, neither one worked day jobs. So I was able to kind of find a cool flow into just running my own thing. And so yeah, I mean, I went through a lot of different phases in life, but it pretty much went from like musician to music producer, to like marketing guy, with a little bit of coach in there at first. But I had an interesting experience because after I stopped touring, I didn't realize I was going to go into coaching. This was back in 2019. And I just needed something that I could do from home that, didn't require me to travel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I ended up kind of stumbling into the whole coaching thing and got my first group coaching program off the ground after just a couple of months ending the touring stint. And kind of ran into this problem of, well, how am I going to grow this business?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how really to do marketing that well. At least I didn't think I did.
Yep.
At the time, I wanted, automated systems and ads. And I mean, I had this whole idea about how it was going to be done. So anyway, after I ran that first group coaching program, I jumped into a mastermind where I was supposed to learn all of that. And I learned all this stuff and didn't really work. So I was kind of stuck in this position of, after 4 months, I had only gotten a $500 deposit from one person after building funnels and running ads and all this stuff. And it was really kind of at the end of my rope. And at that point, actually my father got interested. He was one of the first 5 people in that group coaching program. I was interested in some of the stuff I was talking about in marketing, was paying a marketing agency a bunch of money to help him with stuff. And they weren't really getting results for him, and said, well, we're already budgeting this, so we might as well just transfer it over. Do you want to maybe try to do some of this stuff? And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can do a better job than what you guys are paying for right now, even though I've never run a marketing agency. And, I understood what needed to be done. So anyway, that was pretty successful. And we had done over 6 figures in sales after a year, all online with funnels and ads. And so then I expanded and started working with other musicians and other people and business owners. And that went on for years, built a team of 6 people, ran this thing. But I wasn't able to really hold the team together. And eventually everything kind of, I realized that it was I had the marketing thing, but like the whole leadership thing, I didn't really.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I couldn't really hold it together, and I ended up continuing to run the agency. In and out, I would work with, a couple people to outsource certain projects, try to train people, but, ended up just sort of, working as like a freelancer with a little bit of delegation and outsourcing with my clients. And then, just kind of last year in the middle of Warrior Council, where I met you and a bunch of the other guys that have been on your podcast, that's when I kind of started to begin, making the transition back into coaching again. And that's recently been completed, and I've sunsetted the agency. So I don't do done for you marketing anymore. And that's kind of been my journey through the space. So I'm committed for this year to just really focus on the coaching aspect of the business, with one core offer and a couple of smaller events, and one mainly the mastermind, which is called the King's Chamber, is what I'm working on. And Harmonic Awakenings is really more based around meditation and manifestation in connection to meditation. So it's really just all about helping people achieve a state of flow where they're able to, be guided by their intuition, and, just be connected to a deeper, higher source than, their own human mind. And that just, seems to really accelerate people's progress and also put them in a place of where they can enjoy what they're gaining and what they're winning. So it's been actually, interestingly enough, it's been easier to scale this than the marketing agency, mainly just because I enjoy the work a lot more.
Right.
And, so, I don't have this sort of hesitation to sell somebody, because I know that once I've taken the cash, that like I'm on the hook for, a hard grind of a ton of, marketing work. And, so, yeah, that's actually made it easier. It's like, I don't know how to say it, but like, I think it's one thing that entrepreneurs oftentimes struggle with is like, it's definitely easier to sell a done for you service because obviously the person who's buying it doesn't have to do it. They just pay you, you do it. And then, that's that. The problem is that model is definitely harder to scale because now you have the issue of like, you can only do so much work yourself for anyone of any kind.
Right.
And so now you're in this situation of where you have to train people to do it. And, it's like you're hiring people, you're training them, you're oftentimes paying either with your time or with your money to train them and pay them to do it. And so you don't actually get out of the need to like coach people and train people, even if you're building a done for you type business. There's like, even if you're just starting a cleaning company, like to replace yourself, you have to train people. There's no way out of it. You're either like, leading and to some degree sort of training or teaching customers or clients on some level. If they don't follow your lead, then you can wind up in a position, or even though you're running your own business, you feel like you're just working a job and just
absolutely
want you to do. And, that's, that feels like a step backwards for people. It's definitely a myth that just because you run your own business, you have more freedom than.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, so there's that. And then, what else? There's also the whole thing about like if you're like coaching people or you're training people, then it's like, well, you're actually selling the transference of knowledge and skill directly to them.
Yeah.
And so either way, like you have to do it. And you just find yourself in this position as an entrepreneur where you can't escape the necessity to step into a leadership role and try to transfer your knowledge and skill to other people, because whether it's with clients or employees or whatever it is, you have to do it. Otherwise you can't replace yourself and you can't grow your business beyond yourself.
Well, I'm excited to dive into some of these architects and understanding, because one of the things you were talking about Brandon, in this journey that I heard you say was just finding this kind of this true place of leading yourself, getting yourself in this healthy place to where you can transfer knowledge well. And of course, we can sell lots of things, but the people that sell, if you will, the things that they're really passionate about, that's I think the best place to be. I mean, you've been, I'm sure you've been sold by people that you're like, do you really believe in this product or service? Like, not really, but I'm been paid as a salesperson. You're like, you can tell the difference between somebody that really believes it and is involved and engaged with that, and how can they, I think that's so important. And
Yeah.
along their journey, like you said, okay, I did this marketing agency, but that wasn't quite for me, and if you're still a successful musician, you've infused that with the meditation. But I think, I want to encourage people that are listening to the Business Roundtable podcast is that we're in a pursuit to help you be, the most effective leader, whether you're the business owner or you're leading a team, you're a director, you're an entrepreneur within the company. And I invited Brennan here because he's got unique skills and experiences that, although there's some parallels that we have, it's very unique. Like we just talked about at the very beginning of this, of your journey, Brandon. And so I love to have different voices talk and share to give you maybe a different perspective on what it looks like to lead your business well. So if you wouldn't mind, Brandon, kind of like get us to, this we were talking about like this archetypal journey that people go through, and obviously you go greater in detail in this King's Chamber, but just kind of for people that maybe have never heard of archetypes and journeys and the mythologies, and I'm a big on like Joseph Campbell and following the hero's journey, and there's lots of things there, but maybe there's some people that have, this is new to them, they haven't heard this before, they haven't considered this, and what's your kind of unique perspective on this, Brennan?
Yeah. Well, archetypes, is a very broad topic because you have everything from, astrological signs to, esoteric, systems like the Kabbalah to, um, like, I mean, it kind of goes on and on. But in this case, we're really just dealing with four archetypes, and inside of the King's Chamber, in the context of the work that I do with men in relation to building businesses, they're actually roles. They're roles that you play. And there's both this large arc of what a man goes through in life that spans years or decades when it comes to switching these roles out. And then there's also the smaller arc that once you sort of master each of these roles, you can go through the cycle faster and build more. And the key thing to understand about these, and I'll get into what they are in a minute, is that, they're kind of this natural way that men move through power. And it's just like the four seasons of, spring, summer, fall, winter, and then it comes back again. It's a natural cycle, and it's very universal. And that's why it's so powerful and why it can be applied to men who are at any stage of their business development in understanding how this stuff works. Because, if you look at it from a linear perspective, you can really get confused because you think there's some ultimate place that you're going to wind up where you're at the top and now you don't need to do anything. And that's not good, right?
Yeah.
So looking at it this way has proven to be very useful and allowed me as a coach to work with guys, who are anywhere from just starting a new business and they have never really started one before to, they already have a business that has 80 clients at once. And, they're trying to remove themselves from the business and delegate, so that they can work on something else.
Yeah.
So, regardless of where you're at in your, business building journey, whether you've had one company, whether you've had 10, if you get this and you really understand how these archetypes work and you're able to move fluidly within them, you're not going to get stuck anywhere. Because you'll understand the natural flow of energy of how men move through power, and you can apply it to yourself. You can also use it as a framework to help lead other people and make sure they don't get stuck either, whether it's your employees or your clients.
I think that's well, you know me because I have a background in environmental consulting back, and I love the natural rhythms. There are natural rhythms throughout our world, the tides, the moon, the
Mhm,
seasons, and so I think um, the world that we live in has this. But if we try to kind of force it or try to force it in a way that's not natural, not and we try to like, well, I only want to stay in summer, and you're like, well, there you can't stay in summer. It just doesn't work that way, you
mhm,
know. So you can try to pretend, but it doesn't work that way. And so thinking about, I love how you're presenting this, Brennan, of
mhm,
like, are you aware of the season or the that you're in? I'm using the season. You may have another word there, but are you aware in what role or what place right now, and what is that looking like for you? So yeah, I'm very interested to learn more about the archetypes, and hopefully people are listening to them and they're thinking, where am I in this journey?
mhm. Yeah, definitely. Um, okay, so yeah, if you want, I can just kind of
Yeah,
dive into it and start to
please.
kind of explain what's going on. So, um, if you kind of envision just like a wheel, right?
Mhm,
Like this, um, you have probably the best way to look at it is I put if the wheel's turning clockwise, like
mhm,
so, right at about the 3 o'clock spot,
mhm,
this is where we kind of start as young boys, and I mean really young, like baby boys.
mhm,
And it's in the archetype of the lover. And this is an archetype where there's no other, where it's like everything is one, all you know is love. There's no fear. And it's this total flow, right? So babies are in this state. They experience emotion. They might cry sometimes, they might laugh sometimes,
mhm.
but like they have no fear, right? Like, probably as a
Yeah,
father and
yeah. You've
most
seen little kids are like, "What are you doing?"
yeah, they don't
Yeah,
have any fear, so, like, they'll crawl right off a countertop or,
yeah,
run right off a ledge,
yeah.
um, unless you go and grab them,
Mhm.
um, and, um, and that in many ways, that's beautiful, right? To be in a
Yeah,
place that's fearless, right?
yeah.
Um, so, and is one thing that tends to happen when you have children is that, as a man, it will naturally kind of start to pull you back into that
Mhm,
lover archetype, if you have made it far enough around the wheel.
mhm,
The problem is that a lot of men, they really haven't made it far enough by the time that happens,
mm,
and so it
mm,
ends up being a state of tension. So a lot of men are very afraid to become fathers, because they haven't really gotten to go back to the lover after you're a young boy requires you go around the wheel. So
mm,
so let me explain this. Um, so a man between about the ages of 1 to 3 is in that lover archetype and
mhm,
is basically completely bonded with his mother.
mhm,
And around the age of 2 or 3, something happens. The mind develops enough that the boy can start to use language and is able to sort of project his imagination on some level. And
mhm,
this is where it's like the mind is now at a place of where it becomes kind of its own little world. And um, that time of development is often also when, like, little boys will tell their first lie,
mm,
where they'll start to, like, try to play tricks on other people or try to find clever ways to manipulate, or get out of things.
mhm.
And so that's when you move from the archetype of the lover to what I call the magician.
Okay.
So the archetype of the magician, and this is something that a lot of friends of mine who are Christian kind of object to it. They're like, one guy was like, "Well, why don't you call it the miracle worker or something?" It's like, no, the magician really is the right way to say it, because
Mhm,
the reality is that the magician's cleverness, the magician's ingenuity
mhm,
and inventiveness is
mhm,
actually primarily driven by fear.
mm.
Because this is
Interesting.
when boys come to know fear, this
Mhm,
is why people tell lies. They're afraid of something.
mhm, mhm,
All that deception and manipulation and all the rest of that, it's all fear motivated.
mhm,
People are trying to avoid some kind of consequence. And this drives a massive amount of inventiveness and cleverness in the world. You think
Mhm.
about it, and you think about all the inventions of war, everything from like guns to the atomic bomb. It's all
Yep.
fear-driven
Oh, yeah.
cleverness, but
Mhm.
very destructive. And you know, as smart as it might be in some ways, as clever as it might be, it obviously has its limitations and its ability to improve the situation. In fact, there's nothing more, the work of the magician can be the most destructive thing ever,
Mhm.
because it tends to be, since it's driven by the root of all negative emotion, which is fear.
Yep.
uh, People who get stuck in the archetype of the magician tend to suppress emotion entirely, and because it's necessary if they are going to try to avoid or destroy or lie or manipulate or whatever. So because fear is the opposite of love,
Yeah.
so it kind of goes from love to fear
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
first little turn, right? And the
Yep.
magician kind of at the bottom of the wheel, right at
Mhm.
the 6 o'clock position.
Got it.
And so then, unfortunately, this is where a lot of men just get stuck. And the reason for this is because um, with enough cleverness and intelligence, I mean, it's pretty amazing what you can manipulate and lie and deceive your way into. You can get yourself
Mhm.
into a position of power. You can build an entire company. You can get yourself into all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
And in a materialistic world where a lot of people really, they don't value anything but like more stuff and more money,
Mhm.
the reality is that the skills of the magician are sufficient to get that. It's
Mm.
just that the means by which they're obtained might not be, um, you know, good or in
Yeah.
alignment with
Ethical. Yeah.
integrity, right? So there's an ethical problem that starts to develop,
Yep.
that ends up creating the situation of where men who get stuck in the magician, because of the lies, because of the deception, because of all these things, if they don't start to move out of it and overcome their fear, then they start to get weighed down by guilt and shame, and
Mm. Yep.
then it creates this place of where there's this negative feedback loop,
Yep.
that just sort of, if it gets bad enough, what ends up happening is it ends up reversing um, the whole flow of movement around this circle back
Mhm.
into the lover, except it's degraded.
Mm.
And by being degraded, it's like actually love is lost because it's still being
Mm.
degraded by fear, but you have, all of the sort of, because the magician's all driven by deception. Um, what you wind up with is the appearance of love, usually in the form of lust and pleasure and things like that,
Mhm.
and everything starts to go backwards in this kind of crazy reverse spiral.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so then you have guys who, they get into their magician energy and they have all this money and they have all these sports cars and all this stuff, but they're lying and cheating and
Mm.
deceiving. And, they got, they might have a wife, but they have like a couple girls on the side. And,
Mm.
you just wind up with a situation where even if they might be good in business, they're actually, kind of not really fulfilled or happy
Yeah.
despite material success, right?
Yeah.
A lot of
Mhm.
American men wind up in this position. So, and a lot of them never get out of that because they don't figure out how to reverse that flow. It's
Yep.
very difficult once you have momentum going in that other direction because you've driven enough by fear and you're going counterclockwise around the circle. Then what ends up happening is you pass out of the lever in reverse and you wind up a tyrant, and it just keeps getting worse. Um, and you end up losing everything ultimately.
Yeah, we don't. So how do we break out of that?
Yeah.
Or like, I'm sure this is part of your journey, but
Mhm.
what if we because you and I, we've been in warrior and we know about
Mhm.
stop lying and really stop living, and I agree with you. We all have a form of lying, mostly to ourselves, let alone other people. So how do you what is that? You know, if we can break through the lies, break through the deception, like you're saying, Brennan, how do
Mhm.
we what's the journey? How do we get to the next part of the journey? Or what?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, here's the thing that you have to realize to get out of that. Because of course the next archetype is the warrior, which is just fascinating because this is where all the work Garrett White has done
mhm,
in warrior, it's all relevant to this archetype. It's really all designed to move men out of the magician into the
mm,
warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all very well documented in, the whole
Yeah.
warrior process.
Yep.
And the essence of it is that you have to just sort of realize that anything that you're building based on lies and deception
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
has a limited lifespan.
Yep.
And the more you build, you're kind of building a Tower of Babel,
Mm.
right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the more power you get and the more gains you get in that are ill-gotten, you can keep building and you can sustain it for a lifetime.
Yeah.
But when it collapses,
Mm-hmm.
it falls very hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? As they say, oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Yep.
Right. And so you can see, from the collapse of empires to all kinds of examples of guys going the other way
Mm-hmm.
around the circle where they continue to be fear driven, that even if you become the emperor, it
Yeah.
all ends very badly for you. You look at Hitler is a great example. Right.
Yep.
So, so yeah, I mean, it's just like a lot of what Garrett says is just like, stop fucking lying. Right. But of course, I mean, it's very simple. But it's not easy because you have all
Right.
this momentum. And if you're going to stop lying and tell the truth, because
Yep.
obviously there's the lies of commission where you're speaking things that are false, and
Yep.
lies of omission where you're hiding what's true and you're not speaking it.
Mm-hmm.
When you make that reversal from deceiving and lying to telling the truth, all the stuff you've built on the deception begins to crumble. You actually accelerate its decay until it completely collapses. And you have to, because if you don't get rid of that and you don't allow it to collapse, you're never able to get the momentum going the other way.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of the first battle of the warrior, is to make that determination and summon the courage to tell the truth. Because if you don't summon the courage to do that, you're just going to keep, building and burning, right?
Yeah.
The kingdom keeps building and burning and nothing lasts, and you lose your house and your girlfriend and your business over and over again. And when it happens, it pretty much all happens at once, with one swoop, right? We've all probably been through that, because that's the default thing that guys go through,
Right.
Until they get this stuff. So you move into the warrior, and that's really all about courage. It's about finding heart again and summoning the courage to move out of fear and into love again in some level.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that now, even though you're moving into love, there's duality,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in the lover, there's unity. There's no duality. When you move into the magician, now there creates this sort of cleft of where it's like you and what you're afraid of, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to avoid that. And then in the warrior, the duality is still there, because you're in this battle, right? Where you're taking action, you're grinding away, you're hacking away, you're doing what's necessary to fight for your family and build your business and do your thing and tell the truth. But it's a battle, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting. And the reality is like, you're not going to win on your own.
Yes. Right.
That's the problem with the warrior. That's the problem with the warrior archetype, is that there's only so far you can take all of this yourself. Yeah, because you're surrounded by people and you have limitations. You build a business, you're going to be limited in how much income you can generate for yourself and your family if you're just operating on your own. And then if nobody's following your lead, even in your family, because it's not just business, it's also your personal life, that nobody wants to follow your lead, or you're not even offering that or getting yourself in a situation where that's possible, then you wind up kind of in this battle where it's like you just feel so overwhelmed, and in many cases like lonely. You might be fighting the good fight, you might be doing the right things, you might be in a place of where you're doing okay. You're doing better than you were when you were stuck in the magician.
Yep.
But the one of the sacrifices that's often necessary to get out of the magician is like, since you're letting what you built on lies and deception crumble, there's this place of where, even though you're moving up the wheel now and you're in a better place, oftentimes guys have to let go of relationships, businesses,
Yeah.
houses, all kinds of things. Just go to the
Because that
dump.
was built on lies. I mean, right? You're going
Right.
from the position. Some of this stuff was built on lies, so you don't want to keep holding on to the lies, right? You're fighting, so you do have, and that's painful at times to let go of those things, right?
Absolutely. There's a heavy price to pay for telling the truth and exposing yourself and letting go of all that stuff. And it could really, like, the whole life that you've built on lies has to go. And the thing is that you really don't even have a chance of winning until you've completely let all of it go.
Mm. Mm.
If you hold on to even a small bit of it, it's going to be enough weight to drag you down. And even though most of you might get into the warrior, you'll never get all of you into the warrior. Some of you will stay stuck in the magician.
Mm.
And because of that, you'll never move to the next archetype, which is the king.
Mm.
Okay. So in order to move to the king archetype, it's interesting because, part of what makes it so hard for people is that what you have to do to get into one of these is often what you have to stop doing to get out.
Right.
So when you move from magician into warrior, that really means doing more and taking more action and being less mental and relying less on cleverness and more on like hard work and massive action.
Mhm.
Okay. But to get out of the warrior and into the king, you have to do less, not more. And the
Mm.
only way you can get away with that, when you've built a kingdom and you've created this whole thing, it's not even really a kingdom at that point. It's more of just like you're fighting the fight, right? It's like it's a
Yeah.
battle, it's a war.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
because you haven't gotten victory yet.
Right.
So you have to do less, actually, because
Mm.
and the reason for that is that it's not just more action that wins the battle. It's the right kind of action.
Mm.
And it's also to get any leverage on your own time, to get to a place of where you can go beyond what's possible for one
Yep.
person. You have to actually you have to take responsibility for things, but you have to let go of control of them.
Mm.
Otherwise, you can never effectively delegate, because if
Right.
you're micromanaging every person that you give to the job, you're not really allowing them to shine and step into any kind of leadership themselves.
And,
And
that's yeah.
yeah.
That's just because you're describing to me in some ways, the solopreneur, right? The warrior, I'm doing it all myself. And
Mhm.
now I've got to bring a team around me to
Mhm.
build the kingdom. And if I know all the answers, that's not right. You have to have other people that have answers, like you said, letting control go. And I think a lot of people, that's interesting because you fought so hard, you're doing this work, like I'm doing it, and then you're like, but I have to let other people come in and have the answers and fight the battles, and I don't have all the quote unquote answers, right? I mean, that is a challenge of letting go, like you said. What do I have to stop doing, and what do I have to start doing to
Yeah.
move from that warrior to king, and that's could see that could be really hard too.
Right. Well, I mean, and you might even have all the answers. The problem is that answers aren't going to win a war for you.
Yeah.
Swords, you need more sword arms, you
Mhm.
need more crossbowmen, you need
Mhm.
more warriors, right?
Mhm.
Just one warrior can't win the war,
Yep.
right? Even because you're storming the fortress,
Mhm.
and it's a siege. So, like, even if you're the most incredible warrior, even if you're Conan
Yeah.
the barbarian, meets like, you know,
It
um, I don't know, like your Conan the Barbarian meets the Terminator, you just really don't have a chance by
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
You're gonna get taken out by yourself because it's too
Uh-huh.
much for any one person. You
Mhm.
can't run a kingdom yourself. So even if you
Mhm.
could take the castle, well, what's gonna happen after that? How are you
Mhm.
going to manage the whole thing?
Yep.
So you have to get other people on board with what you're doing. And what's interesting about that is that now you're moving into a little bit of a whole different thing where it's like it's about it becomes about creating roles and storytelling and offering people opportunity, and it becomes more about speaking than
Mm.
doing, actually, when you move into the king energy.
Mhm.
It's actually more connected to the magician than it is to the warrior, because you can see there's interesting
I
connections between the
because
opposed.
of the if you're looking at that circle, the 12 and the 6.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, because the king's at the 12 and the magician's at the 6.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is really to move into the king energy, you cannot do it on your own. And the first person you're probably going to need is a magician to help you figure out what to do and how to do it, because
Mm.
you don't have all the answers probably,
Mhm.
you know. And so, this is where you see, even in historical examples
Mhm.
of virtually every empire and kingdom, the king always had this right-hand man or person behind the throne, or really a left-hand man,
Mm.
who was sort of the strategist and architect of how he was going to solve all the problems.
Mhm.
And then he also had a warrior to go actually lead the armies and do the
Yeah,
battle.
yeah.
So a king really needs to really move into kingship. It's almost like you have to get a few other guys around you that
Mhm.
can play the other roles, right? You even
Mhm.
need,
Mhm.
on the lover side, it's either going to be like your queen becomes
Mhm.
the lover for
Mhm.
you, or and possibly, and like someone like the court jester, to add a little bit of fun and enjoyment and artistry into your court, because otherwise it's just an endless list of tasks to be done and problems to be figured out, and it gets
Mhm.
incredibly boring, and it just destroys your soul. Even if you're the emperor, you need some entertainment.
Yeah, yeah.
You need some fun in your life. You
Right,
need some
right,
pleasure,
right.
right? Because it's a lot,
Yes.
and the crown is a heavy thing to wear.
Absolutely.
So you can rise into kingship kind of when you kind of get all of them, and you learn to kind of lead, and you've got some other guys around you that can help you, figure the problems out, take the actions, and add some fun and spark to it, and a queen probably too is going to help a
Mhm.
lot. So
Absolutely.
you got those key things in place, and now you're in the king archetype. Um, but of course, it's not over. And this is where kind of the big lie or the big deception is that once you're in that place of power, that now, like, you're at the top of the pyramid and you control everything. So like you're God, basically. A lot of guys let it get to their heads.
Mm.
And the problem with that is that the people who have the most are always subject to the greatest temptations. So
Mhm.
when men get into this power position, this is oftentimes when um, they start to lose it. Like, yeah, they might have the queen, they might have the wife, but then they get the mistress, and then they get a couple other things going on, and then they've got everybody wants a piece of you when you're the
Mhm.
king. They all want to, because you have the power, you have the wealth, you have all the control, and all the
Right?
you're like the god of your kingdom, and everybody wants something from
Piece
you.
of you. Yeah.
And so it becomes a really serious problem. In fact, it's more difficult to deal with and solve this problem than any of the problems that are in the other archetypes. So even though you have all these benefits of, you don't have to do everything yourself, and you've got people to think for you, and you've got people to even add some, spice to your kingdom. Um, the problem is that now um, everyone's paying attention to you. And you have a hard time getting any time for yourself.
Mm.
It starts to get exhausting just dealing with all the meetings and all the training and all these tasks,
Yep.
and
Yep.
um and it just becomes exhausting, right? And it puts wrinkles on your forehead. And politicians know exactly what this is like, because that's, of all professions, we see they're trying to go straight for that. They're trying to go
Mm.
straight for ruling, right?
Yep.
Being the king energy. And I think it's one of the wisest choices that our country has made, because we kind of seem to start this trend, is to put a time limit on how long a man can sit on the throne.
Because we kind of know human conditions, huh?
Right, exactly. And because if you stay there too long and you get stuck there, it's the worst place of all to get stuck. Because you're not God ultimately. You are going to be subject to temptations. You're not perfect. You can't do everything. You're not going to make all of your decisions aren't going to be perfect. And you're going to get in a place of where you just want your life back. Ultimately. Right.
Yeah.
And now this is where guys who build businesses, like, they want to sell the business, right? They want to get out of it. They want to sell, but then they find it's not so easy to just sell the business. The person who's buying it needs to know how to run it. And so now it's like, you can sell it, but you kind of got to hang out to make sure that the people who got it, know how to run it properly. Yep. And then there's this whole process of replacing yourself, and doing it in a way that's conscious and effective, instead of just by abdication and watching some guy come into that position and making a whole mess of it, right? So at some point after you've been in that king energy long enough, you're gonna be wanting to make the next turn and going back from that 12 o'clock position to the 3 o'clock again, which is into the lover, right? This is where it's like you're so exhausted from running the kingdom that now it's like you just want to go play. You want to go on vacation. You want to go make art. You want to do something that's, totally impractical and just fun, right? And this is like you kind of almost become a kid again in a way. Right? You're rediscovering the joyous beauty of play and creativity. And if you don't make that turn, then it's like, yeah, you could be the emperor of the world, but it's no fun. So what's the point, right? Like, what's the value of that, right? That's, you'd be the biggest fool in the world. So yeah, nobody really wants to live in a kingdom like that. And so kings that don't make that turn, and eventually allow the next, generation or the next person or whatever to kind of come in, it's like they don't get to experience the benefits of all the work they've done in their lives up till that point. They don't get to live in the kingdom they built because they're too busy running it. And so that's kind of what happens. So then you move into that. And, a man can go through many of these cycles. You have serial entrepreneurs or guys who have built companies and sold them over and over again. And what you find is building wealth really is about how quickly can you move from one to the next. It's not about staying in one or the other, because the guys who actually are able to build wealth and are able to really make this work the best, they don't need to be the king all the time. They don't need to be the person doing everything. They don't need to be the person figuring everything out. And they don't even need to be the entertainment or the spark of it. They'll move from one to the other and maintain like a fluid flow and learn how to play all these different roles and how to train people into these different roles so that they can replace themselves as they make their way around. So yeah, that's essentially the framework that we work with inside the King's Chamber. We kind of decide, we figure out, ask each guy before they come in, well, where are you in this cycle with your business and your life in general? And where do you feel like you're strongest in these archetypes? And where do you feel like you're weakest? And then, what's magical about it, which is super cool. And I use the term magical really, interchangeably with miraculous, because I don't really feel like magic is necessarily deceptive. It's interesting because, like, from just a spiritual perspective, most people don't know that the word gospel actually is shortened for God's spell. So, kind of depends on the language you're using, but the reason why this system has this sort of magical thing about it is like, it's a natural cycle that seems to be set up on a higher level that's universal, right? You can look at the seasons and you can look at the snow, and we can't really explain why we have this cycle. We can't explain why there's winter and fall and, all the rest of this stuff. We can't explain really why this happens exactly. We've been trying with science for years, but do we really know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's debatable. But if you just kind of surrender to it and go with the flow of it, you find that, like, in your flowing, you find your way
Yeah.
and you don't get stuck. And
Right.
there's a beauty to that. There's a grace to that. There's a peace to that that's pretty much priceless. Because any guy who's stuck in any one of these places will tell you it's
Right.
painful. It doesn't matter which one it is. It could be the warrior, it could be the king. You can even get stuck in the lover after you've made the turn from king to lover the second time. And now it's like, okay, now it's just an endless amount of parties and entertainment. And now
Yeah.
you can't stop drinking, and you can wind up right back in this place of where now you're stuck and you can't get anywhere, and you need to think your way out of it because you're moving down into the magician again. So it's like we go through these cycles as men as we move through power. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be our own business. We might just be rising through the ranks of another company, moving to a different job, whatever it
Mhm.
is. But
Mhm.
this particular model is very useful for kind of identifying where are you on this sort of map of this general overall archetypical journey. And based on that, what do you need to let go of? And what do you need to move towards, just energetically? And so that's the power of it. And that's why I work with just a small group of 4 men, because I found that any more than that, it's things kind of tend to get diluted.
Mhm.
Less than that, it's like, like I can work with guys one-on-one, but it actually helps to have, some
Few other cover guys.
players, because part of how we work inside of this group is we'll take on these roles.
Uh-huh.
One guy's has an issue where they're having problems leading or whatever. It's like, okay, so yeah, you're having issues leading. So, okay, for this particular thing, you're the king, and we'll come in and talk to you as these other archetypes to help give you
Interesting.
some ideas of how to move through this issue that you're
Yeah.
having. And it makes it fun for everybody because everyone has a role to play. It's not like you just have one leader or one coach that's doing it. We all take turns kind of unpacking these different situations that we have in our lives.
Mhm.
And it adds an element of fun to it, but
Absolutely.
that also makes it more effective because now everyone's participating on an equal level. And you know, and it's just like, you don't have to just do the same thing over and over again. And
Mhm.
it helps train guys to learn how to be and act inside of archetypes that are different from where they might be stuck. And that
Wow.
in itself helps them move out of that being stuck.
Oh, man, I know we could go definitely further here,
Hmm.
Brennan, but I think this is a good overview. How do people find you, connect you with you, and learn more? Because I think if you're listening to this, I'm listening, I'm fascinated, and I'm where am I in this journey? Am I a warrior? Am I a king? Am I a magician? Hopefully, warrior. Brennan knows I'm in the warrior phase. I'm working toward the king right now. But where is that for you? And yeah, I'd love just to share, Brennan, just briefly, how do people can get connected with you and learn more about this whole archetypes in the King's Chamber?
Yeah, well, you can go to the Harmonic Awakenings website and contact me there and learn a little bit more about the stuff that I do. It's harmonicawakenings.com. You can find me under the Harmonic Awakenings business page on Facebook, or just look me up as Brennan Murphy on
Yeah,
Facebook.
you connect with me. Brennan and I are connected. We collaborate. Uh, I mean, Brennan, this has been fantastic. I think just hearing you walk us through this, and if anybody hasn't heard this before, but I think you can apply this to your life and say, like, where am I in this journey without any judgment? Maybe
Hmm.
you're the magician, maybe you're the lover, you're the warrior, the king, but
Hmm.
recognizing that this is a part of a journey and
Hmm.
it's ongoing, and recognizing that, and that you have a resource here. That's what this is all about, the Business Roundtable Podcast, bringing resources to help you listen, take it in, and say, man, Brendan could really help me, and reach out to him. I've worked alongside him, know him very really well. We've shared a lot, and I really appreciate you coming on the podcast here, Brennan.
Well, you're so welcome. Yeah, the thing to remember is just keep moving in the right direction. Wherever you are, wherever you're stuck, you can always move past it. You just might have to let go of something and play a different role, not just get stuck in the same old role that you've been playing for however long you've been playing it.
And hence, having a coach like yourself that comes along can move you faster through the process. So you're not spending so long when you really, like you said, need to let go and get to that next spot. That's what I know. You and I have that same passion. And so just thank you so much, Brennan, for being here.
You're so welcome, David. I love this. I love your podcast. And thanks so much for having me on.
Well, thanks everybody for listening into the Business Roundtable podcast. We love having you follow along, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever your favorite podcast platform. We're going to bring lots more new guests this year here in 2025. So we've got a lot more folks that are interested in joining us, like Brennan. We're so glad. And just come back next week for our next episode. Thanks everybody for listening in.